Coach Mangini back with us for some stories to start your morning.
Yeah.
The Steelers were stuffed twice on 4th and 1 against the Jaguars. A lot of people are questioning why Big Ben didn't take all 6'5", 245 pounds and sneak it straight up the middle. But Roethlisberger says he's not allowed to audible to a quarterback sneak. Coach, you buying Big Ben's comments?
Look, the quarterback sneak's not for everybody. I had Brett Favre. He would not quarterback sneak.
Favre's not nearly as big as
some coordinators get spooked by it because they had a bad experience in the past. Am I buying that he's not allowed to? Yeah, I think that they want him to run the play that's called.
Roethlisberger, 18 of 19 of his career on the quarterback sneak. So he's a guy who liked doing it. I find it very odd. I believe him, actually, that Todd Haley just said you're not allowed to. That would strike me as something Big Ben would have the cachet to go to him and say, I want to be allowed to do this. Or does that not exist?
I think you can have those discussions and you can work it out ahead of time. But if you have a fourth down play that you feel strongly about and you want it run, then I'm sure you're going to say, hey, call it and run it.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the Saints now. Drew Brees is a free agent after this season. But fret not, City of New Orleans. The 39-year-old Brees said, I'll be here as long as they'll have me, hopefully. Nick, should the Saints bring Brees back on a multi-year deal?
You have a chance to win the Super Bowl this year. You have a chance to win the Super Bowl next year. You're not going to if you don't have Drew Brees next year. So, yes, they should. I'm always skeptical of the 40-year-old quarterback, even though Brady's trying to knock some of that skepticism down. Brees turned 39 2 days ago, so next year he'll be a nearly 40-year-old quarterback. Will they be happy about a multi-year deal in year 3 or year 4 of it if he's still around? Maybe not, but you got to take that medicine if it gives you a chance to win the Super Bowl next year.
If multi-year is 2, maybe that's something that's reasonable. And my question is, would Drew be willing to do a shorter-term deal? When you spend the type of money that you spend on Drew Brees, if you push it out into the future, you could have real problems if it doesn't work out.
This Justin multi-year includes 2. Tom Brady, moving on, is looking for his 6th Super Bowl ring and doesn't want to slow down anytime soon. Brady said yesterday, when I can't play at a great level, when I can't help a team win, then I don't want to be a part of that team. Coach, isn't it hard for an athlete to know when he's not helping a team anymore? I feel like fans and coaches seem to know before the actual athlete does.
Yeah, and in New England, typically they know well ahead of time. Bill's always done a really good job of identifying those things. I think Tom continues to defy logic, and being with him, I would never bet against him because he just always finds a way to do it. Now, I could definitely see Tom in the future being a guy who takes over a team. Maybe he takes over the Patriots at some point.
In what role?
Maybe he becomes the GM. Maybe he's the guy that runs the team. He loves football. He loves competing. I can see him being in football for a long time in another capacity.
A John Elway type of story with the team you were great with in taking over the operations.
Yeah, just like Peyton Manning's talked about it, Brady to me would be excellent in the situation.
That's really interesting because I had never even thought about him in that lane. I've thought about him in the lane that he seems to be pushing towards post-career, which is that fitness lane, the pliability.
I like that lane, Nick.
And but here's the reason I bring it up, because I think it's applicable to what we're discussing. It is in Brady's post-career interest to extend his career as long as possible, not just to stay in the public eye, because he's so famous, he'll be in the public eye as long as he wants to be, but to be the patient zero that this works. Like, the TB12 method and the Guerrero, all that stuff he's doing is a lot easier sell if at 43 years old he's still breaking records. Do you follow me on that? Like, it makes sense for what he's trying to do long term to try to extend that window.
Yeah, I don't think he's looking at this as I need to keep playing so it works out for TB12. I think that his thought process is I've got a lot of time left, and he's such a hyper-competitive guy that he's going to go until the wheels fall off.
All right, finally, a fan captured some pictures of Sean Payton mocking the Vikings skull chant right before the final play that gave the Vikings the win. It's been a rather controversial season for the Saints head coach. He's made a number of questionable gestures. Nick, what was your reaction to this one?
I try to be fair. I wish more people in the media were the same when it comes to evaluating all these guys the same. And I like stuff like this. I'm sure it probably doesn't help his team.
I am shocked that you like it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, so I'm not going to kill Sean Payton for it. I'm not going to ignore it. I'm not going to act like he didn't do the choke thing, the shoving with Dirk Cutter after a Week 17 game. But pro sports, or especially pro team sports, testosterone laden, a lot of like high school-esque stuff, and Sean Payton gets caught up in it sometimes. Now, I feel like not every coach would get a pass from this, from everybody, but all of them would get a pass from me. Like, listen, it ended up blowing up in his face. They lost the game, not because he did that, but now it looks bad. I don't think many coaches would do it, but this is part of Sean Payton's fabric. Part of his DNA is he is, as Chris would call him, an edge player or an edge coach.
And if he won, people would love it. People would be talking about what a great move it was. And if you lose, you got to eat it. You got to own it. To me, the more difficult decision that he made was when he got the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty a couple weeks ago that hurt the team. Those things I don't agree with. If he wants to do these things and that's his personality, I'm fine with it, because enough people get criticized for being unemotional.
Fine, you want to do it, fine, but if your team starts doing it, then it's a little ironic for you to start talking to your team, and they haven't, but if it turns into a thing like it does with the Steelers, then it's a little ironic for you to have your leader out there and trying to control a locker room the same way.
You're absolutely right. Once you start doing those things, you can't reel everybody else back in, because you set the tone that it's okay.
But aren't there different rules for the coach than the players? Like, don't we see that even, like, you mentioned the unsportsmanlike, but referees allow coaches to be much more in their face or much more histrionic than they do players with them. And we always, whether it's fair or not, I think it's always silly, especially in college sports, that we hold the amateurs to higher standard than the highly compensated adults, but we do this in pro sports all the time. We accept a level of misbehavior from the coaches that we wouldn't accept from the players, whether that's an NBA coach flipping out on the sideline.
We're not accepting that.
What level of misbehavior from coaches are we accepting?
We allow coaches to, when it comes, let's talk about the officials for a moment. We allow coaches to flip out over bad calls in the NBA or the NFL in a way that the referees and the general public do not allow the players.
But arguing with a ref is very different than this, taunting and teasing and then this sign and the pushing and all of that. That's a different story.
And I do think that coaches historically have been the advocate for the teams if they feel something is wrong or something was officiated incorrectly. To me, the taunting, those types of things, it's going to be hard to yell at a player afterwards if you've done it. Like that's a different example.
Never leave the show. You just agreed with me on that? Please stay forever.
It also means you're probably on the wrong side of the argument, Coach.
I bet you there's no coffee left in that cup. He just does that for effect. It drives me crazy, Coach. It drives me crazy. It goes like this, and then something I'm going to say for you, Jenna. Okay.
I'm going to hide behind this cup.
Yep.
And it's going to be fun.
Right.
Every day, Coach. Every day. All right, moving on. Good news if you're a fan of NFC Championship games, because there is one this weekend. Vikings at Eagles, and the Vikings are the favorites by 3 points. Nick Foles was able to lead Philadelphia to win over Atlanta, but failed to score a touchdown the entire game. Now he faces only the best defense of any team left playing, so there's that. Coach, how can the Eagles' offense break through against this Vikings defense?
Well, watching the Eagles, everything here is based off of timing and spacing, and they do a really good job of building formations. So they have stacks, they have bunches, they have ways to allow guys to get free from press coverage, and there's a creativity to this offense that I really like, and I think it's going to help them against Minnesota because it's going to force Minnesota to make adjustments. Now, the question is whether or not they're going to be able to maintain that spacing and timing as Minnesota transitions into like a zone defense and gets up and starts hitting these guys. That to me is going to be an important part of it. The next thing is they put the ball on the ground 3 times last game, including on the, what was it? The
4 times. No, they had 4 fumbles.
Well, I was just thinking in the first half alone, the ball was on the ground 3 times, including the one that Nick Foles scored on. They've got to do a much better job of protecting the football because they're not going to be able to overcome this against them.
I mean, it's one of the reasons why Atlanta's still got to be waking up saying, how do we now win that game? Like, I mean, they had every opportunity early. They had a lead at halftime, but that's not the discussion here. I understand. The question is, can the Eagles often score enough points? Like, and I don't think you're going to need a ton of points because the Eagles' defense is good. The Vikings are not known for this super high potent offense, even though they were very good, especially, you know, in the waning moments against the New Orleans Saints. Can they score enough points? And over the last 3 weeks, we don't have a lot of evidence of it. They've scored 2 touchdowns on offense since the Giants game. Now, the Giants game, they scored a bunch of points first game, Nick Foles. Maybe everything's going to be okay. The 3 games since then, they've scored 2 touchdowns. In the 3 games since then, they had their lowest total yards, their second total lowest yards, and their 5th lowest total yards of any of the 17 games they've played this season. The offense has come grinding to a halt without Carson Wentz, which shouldn't be that much of a shock. Like, you went from the guy who was the leading MVP candidate to an average backup quarterback, and that's what you're going to deal with, which is why, in this game in particular, I think the Vikings are going to say, we're going to stop the run. Like, Nick Foles, you're going to beat us, okay, but we are going to sell out to stop Blunt and Ajayi, which is why you need Zach Ertz, Alshon Jeffrey, Torrey Smith, who hasn't been great this year, those guys to make big plays after they catch the football. Yards after catch, to me, is the only path to the Eagles scoring a bunch of points in this game.
Well, what I really loved about last game, one of the first plays in the game, it might even been the first play of the game, they take that deep shot. Okay, and as I said earlier, it's a spacing and timing offense, so a lot of it is short and catch and runs. So the ability to take that shot early, to back the defense off, to me, I thought was a really good decision, and they're going to have to mix those shots into the game against the Vikings. The other thing I thought they did pretty effectively was the misdirection with like the reverses and the shuffle passes, incorporating some of those, and then the screen game, to me, is another important way to slow down that pass rush.
I just want to mention the deep shot. There was a little trick-or-treat quality to that. It ended up being great because you drew a pass interference penalty, started the game off wonderfully. The reason you drew the pass interference penalty was because Nick Foles threw such a bad ball. Like, you can do that stuff, but there is the risk of it absolutely going the other way on you. That one didn't because they drew the penalty. But I do think they're going to have to take those chances, those calculated risks.
And the next ball was pretty bad, and the ball after that. In fact, the whole first half, he seemed to not find his timing and not find his rhythm, and it seemed like he was very excited while he was out there, or too excited to really calm himself down and really understand and perform within the moment of what was happening. I think that's going to be an issue because you talk a lot about setting the tempo, getting early points up, doing whatever you can to score on this Vikings team because you're going to have to hold on to it. How do you do that with Nick Foles?
Well, the worst thing that can happen is if they just commit to running the ball and throwing short passes, Minnesota's going to sit down there and just take away. They're going to sit in the box. They're going to have people that are stationary in spots, so the timing's going to be disrupted. They have to take some of those shots. So even though it was a bad pass, and even though it could go the other way,
you got to risk it.
If they don't back that defense off, if they don't show that they're willing to go down the field, then Minnesota's just going to keep creeping up, and everything's going to get harder in what they really want to do, which is the short spacing timing routes.
And if you're a head coach, what's the last thing you say to Nick Foles before he heads out there to start the game?
Well, I don't think it's going to be about one final moment. I think what you're talking to him about the whole week is just taking what's there. Okay, you don't have to. We don't have to try to make a huge play every time. It's the same thing with being in the pocket. This is a pretty good team in terms of pass rush. You try to extend plays, and you can get into the situation that Pittsburgh got into, where it's a strip sack, fumble, and it's going the other way. Take what's there. Live to fight another day. At the end of each drive, we either want to end it with a kick, or extra point, or punt. You know what I mean? Each drive should end that way.
Well, and when you do get in the red zone, you have to come away with 7. I don't think, and listen, I know that's cliche, like you always want 7, and I get it. But the point that I'm making is, I think the Vikings are going to be tremendously stingy on yards. Like, I don't think this is a game where the Eagles are going to be driving up and down the field. So the times, whether it's because Case Keenum makes a mistake, you get a big special teams return, you get one big play broken, and all of a sudden you have 1st and 10 from the 15, you have to get 7 in those spots. Because you're not going to have a lot of scoring opportunities, the way I look at it. The one question I want to ask you before we move on,
But are you advocating that if they get in the red zone and it's 4th down, they should go for it instead of kicking the field goal?
No, I mean, I would advocate for that if you have a 4th and goal from inside the 3, yes, I would advocate in those spots. But no, I'm not saying if you have 4th and 8 from the 12 that you go for it. I just mean and again, it's easier said than done, but it's always important to come away with points in the red zone. In this game in particular, coming away with 7, I think is critical to them having any chance. But I want to ask you one question. The Vikings defense has been unbelievable all year, except for the second half against the Saints where they were bad. Is there anything you think the Eagles can take from that, the most recent time these guys were on the field? Here's what happened, or is that too much about Drew Brees was playing quarterback for the other team?
Well, you could look at it on the flip side and say that New Orleans was really bad in the first half of that game, and the second half is more traditionally what you expect from New Orleans. Can you take a lot away from that game? You may be able to take away some formation things that they did, which created space for the receivers. There may be some concepts in the running game that you think you can incorporate that worked well for them. But in terms of comparing that New Orleans offense and the style with which they play and that quarterback versus the style with which Nick Foles play, it's hard to go apples to apples there.
All right, don't go anywhere. Now I really mean it.
Perfect.
Coming up, Coach breaks down how the Patriots should attack the Jaguars' stingy defense. Literally is going to break the whole thing down.
No, we got something special planned for you in this final segment.
Don't get nervous. Nervous? Don't be nervous.
I'm always so...